So the Kyrie piece of it, and I know we always do the regular season versus the playoffs thing. Regular season, people are looking for storylines, and we talk about how incredible Kyrie is, and there was a lot of stuff about, are these the two most gifted offensive players who have been on the same team and stuff like that. I'm swinging the other way. I think Kyrie now, we have a pretty big body of work that he is just not reliable to pay a max contract to. There's way more evidence that if you're trusting this guy, if you're really counting on him, you probably can't. And we saw in game 2 and game 3, when KD, this series is a bad matchup for him, whether we're saying he's underachieving or whether he's a guy who's in his 15th year of the league and maybe the Celtics are a little too young and too athletic for him at this stage of his career. And this is a bigger sign of kind of where KD is at this point in his career, maybe. But the Kyrie piece, the whole Kyrie thing was he's supposed to be able to score against anybody. Nobody can guard Kyrie. Most naturally gifted offensive guard we've had. Where's he been? And does he want to be there? And would you pay him? He's got this contract coming up. Stephen A. did this whole thing on his on Countdown today about how he should only be paid year by year. I think I agree. Maybe every 2 years. Would you give Kyrie a max from what we've seen the last 5 years? I wouldn't.
I wouldn't want to, but as I remind all of us all the time, what are your options? And it's hard to get these guys. And the other part of Kyrie, how does Durant feel about it? If Durant wants you to pay him, then you're going to pay him. And then you're going to talk yourself into it. You're going to say, oh, we have Ben Simmons coming back. And it's the same thing as the Harden thing. You think I'd want to pay him $60+ million in 2027? Of course not. But I also don't want to then say no to that and pretend I'm going to be able to pull something else off in the next 2 or 3 years. So I agree with you on the surface, but the market will dictate that Kyrie's going to do better than that. Hell, right before this series, Bill, or even after game 1, you're watching, because remember when it was, there's no market for him. Nobody would want him once they realized he wasn't going to be playing home games. That was totally gone after game 1.
Right.
So however bad this ends up being, they get swept. He has a couple more quotes that don't make any sense and whatever. Like they're probably still going to say, well, what are our options? What actually is better for us in this?
Well, if I'm trying to salvage this, we don't know how game 4 is going to go, but I think we have a decent idea considering the body language and the way the Nets, I thought, kind of rolled over down the stretch that made the half hard to come back later. It was too late. But if you just look at it objectively, game 1, they're up 5, 107-102 with 4:22 left. Game 2, they're up 92-85 with 10 minutes left. Game 3, there's less than 8 minutes left. Celtics are up 4. It's not like if I'm Chicago and I'm coming out of that Milwaukee series, I'm way more stressed out about what is the future of our team. I know Caruso got hurt and, I know you don't have Lonzo, but just in general, like, how do we beat Giannis? I would come out of that series and be like, Jesus, what's our strategy? Because we just got our ass kicked. If you're Brooklyn, you're like, well, if we get Simmons back, COVID's over, Kyrie gets to play a full season, maybe we have a better chance against Boston. You could talk yourself into it, right? And then all of a sudden you're re-signing Kyrie for 3 years, $150 million.
Yeah, that's probably what will happen. Maybe it's a different coach. I don't know. I think what Nash has had to put up with through this hasn't been a blast.
That was another thing that was on yesterday about Steve Nash. Is this it for him? Is he going to get bounced? It bounced. Who had a tougher last 2 years of coaching things thrown at him than Steve Nash? Would you want to coach this team? What would your plan be with the players he has?
If I were Steve Nash and made $150 million in my career, I would find better
You'd move on?
Spend my time. Yeah, I would be like.
You think he's jealous of like JJ Redick on Countdown and First Take? He's like, man, that looks so much easier than what it would have gone through dealing with these guys.
And that when it's left to like, oh, I can't believe they put Blake out there. They're trying to figure out anything. They're trying to do anything to get spacing, and Blake actually is making threes. The problem is he can't move. On the other end, it was like, oh, hey, Blake's out here. All right, torching this. Because they played a group in game 3 that had never played a game together. Like they'd never had minutes together ever. And some of the spacing stuff worked in game 2 with Brown and Dragic going for 30 combined in the first half. But if you're Boston, you go, that's probably not happening in the second half, or maybe even at any other stretch of this playoff series. So we'll live with that. And then the other great adjustment, like Boston's made adjustments, but Boston's had better options for adjustments. It's funny how people get mad about adjustments. Well, putting Blake in was an adjustment.
Right.
It just didn't really do much for you on the defensive end because you usually have somebody there that you can attack. If you're Boston on the Brooklyn side of it, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen because, if you look at Kyrie and the Durant part of it, they clearly didn't like the Kenny Atkinson vibe. I also think that when you're a certain stature as a player, if you're just not that guy, it's kind of like when everybody was saying get rid of Spoelstra and have Riley coach again. Like people just have a hard time with other people that don't have the resumes.
Yeah.
And so Atkinson falls into that category. He gets bounced. And I think Nash was like, you guys can kind of do your own thing. And now it's on them. They've been kind of allowed to be isolation players because it's worked. The offensive numbers were really good when those two played together. But now,
but you're the one who hates that. You're the one who talks about when we get to the playoffs, there's that certain style that becomes a lot harder to pull off. And I think even though it's two guys instead of one with the Nets, same thing, right? It's somebody dribbling.
Two. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's either one of them just dribbling as the shot clock's winding down, trying to create a shot. There's not a lot of ball movement. Their assists were, I think, what were they, like 18, 19 assists lower than the Celtics for these 3 games. But just in general, fourth quarter, especially when Boston would ratchet up the defense, it became the one-on-one stuff. And I don't know. I'm always going to like my chances against that if I have a good defense.
I think that you need really great isolation players still to advance in the playoffs because things break down and everybody becomes more predictable. But you've got to throw some other actions out there. There has to be something that makes me think of you differently defensively instead of 5 sets of eyeballs all on Durant as he's at the break, looking at all of these guys. And you're like, hey, figure it out. It also kind of speaks to how crazy the Milwaukee thing was last year because this was not what Milwaukee did with them. And it still almost worked.
Well, I wonder, so Durant's year 15, 939 regular season games, 154 playoff games. It's over 40,000 minutes. He's had 2 major injuries. Got injured this year too. 37.2 minutes a game this year. He's averaging 42 in the playoffs, which in my opinion is ludicrous. Like you would ultimately, in the ideal situation, you want him around 33, 34. Maybe we shouldn't be shocked that he's entering a different stage of his career. I think LeBron, one of the things I was wondering is like, has LeBron just ruined our brain's ability to process that NBA players are supposed to get old and right around year 15, year 16, year 17, you're supposed to start moving in a different phase of your career? When LeBron was in year 15, what year was that? He came in the league 03. So that was his 2018. That was when he was like the one-man show against, taking the Cavs to the finals. And he had his big 51-point game in game 1, all that stuff. Maybe him and I guess Chris Paul to a lesser degree, maybe we just assume that these guys can't start to get old. Because the Durant in the 3 games we saw, to me, seemed a little bit old. It wasn't just like the Celtics were discombobulating in his head. It was like he had somebody, Tatum, who's just at the peak athletic, whatever he's ever going to be in his entire career. You watch Giannis against the Bulls, that guy is at the peak athletic apex that he's ever going to be at. Peak athletic apex. I think peak and apex are the same thing. Sorry about that.
We get the point, though, because there's a lot of emphasis.
You know what I mean? You're in your mid-20s. It's just different. Durant in 2012 going against LeBron is probably going to be able to play 45 minutes a game in the finals and feel fine at the end of the 5 games. This Durant will not. He's had some work done. Broken foot, major knee thing. He's had 2 different MCL things. He's 7 feet tall, and the Celtics are just beating the shit. And the Achilles, the Celtics are beating the shit out of him. And I to me, he looks like a guy who's starting to look like his peak, his apex might have, the last tail end of it might have been last year.
It's a hard argument to go against right now after these 3 games. Shot getting blocked a couple times too. We were like, what the hell is that? And then Tatum even said like, oh, I think I got lucky. He was almost suggesting like, don't say anything here. That could motivate him. But I think we all, after the Achilles though, saw him and going, this guy's nuts. Like he was the MVP for a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw something about the Nets going, oh, here we go again with these 7-8 seeds because of the Lakers last year. And it's somebody I like, so I forget who said it. And I'm like, yeah, but when Durant went down, Brooklyn was a 1 seed. So it wasn't like they were the 7 seed coasting with these guys playing 70-something games. They're main dudes. They were a 1 seed basically because of him. And so that was all this year.
Put a
So
lot of miles on him.
You might be right, but you're so early on the short call here. I don't know if you'll be able to cover the premiums.
Right.
That's
well.
I just look. I've been guilty of the Durant. When you really think about offensive things and options that you have versus what Giannis have, like I still would rather have the Durant package. I'm not going to make that argument anymore. I may think it. I'm not going to make it out loud. I'm just not going to make it out loud anymore because I felt really good about it for a long time, and this is not the week to be doing it.
Well, I think that's maybe the biggest takeaway from round one, if we're talking like whatever group you want to have with that top tier, is that I had Giannis 1A, Durant 1B, but I just know next round they're not going to be able to do this to Giannis. So the argument kind of naturally solved himself. When it's Celtics Milwaukee, Giannis is going to figure out a way to affect that game on both sides of the court, no matter what defense the Celtics are throwing at him. He's also 7 years younger than Durant, 8 years younger than Durant. So this is the phase of his career where he should be able to figure that. Same way Durant in 2017 was 35 a game against the Cavs in the finals. Like, it's the peak of his powers. I think Giannis is at the peak of his powers right now.
How bad is this Brooklyn decision looking for Durant?
So I'm glad you brought that up. I actually feel bad, even though this was all his fault. I feel bad for him. It's like having a friend who has like the bad quickie marriage where you're just like, you're trying to be supportive, but deep down you kind of know how it's going to turn out. I think with Durant, the Kyrie thing, there were all of these red flags. I mean, red flags galore. People in Boston, that was so funny about Durant when he was talking about Kyrie with the Boston fans, and he was saying how, when you've loved someone, you still feel that pain when they leave, or whatever the hell he said. It was like, people wanted Kyrie to leave. Nobody wanted him to stay. And the same thing with Cleveland. Like, I don't think there were tears shed when he left the Cavs. And Durant just couldn't resist him. And then he's like, let me bring my buddy James Harden into this. And then, we'll never know what happened in October, November. Somebody will write a great book about it, right? Where from all the intel I have, which I think is pretty good, it's Harden like, what the fuck? Kyrie's not going to play? What the fuck did you get me into? And then KD being mad that Harden wasn't in shape, and just things start splintering. All of a sudden, 4 months later, Harden's on Philly. I think that's what happened. Seems reasonable.